Hello, everyone. We're so glad you are here. This is a development forum that has grown out of the Santa Cruz County Development Roundtable, but for some of these conversations, there's been an interest far beyond the Central Coast, and so happy to open it up. I know some folks are coming from much farther, and feel free to put in the chat who you are and where you're coming from, and we are just delighted that you are here. Wanted to start off just inviting you to take a deep breath. I know that everyone on this Zoom is doing really big, wonderful things in the world and want to have deep appreciation for that, and also to invite you to just appreciate all you do and be present for this hour of learning with two incredible leaders who I'm so excited to chat with. I want to invite everyone to be on mute because unless you are one of our presenters, and if you put your questions in the chat, then Geb, thank you for being here and being tech support. We'll make sure that we get them, and we'll get to as many as we can. So my name is Sharon Papo. I'm the CEO of Indigo Skies Consulting, which is a fundraising, executive and leadership coaching and training firm. And we do many things, but one of our big focuses is on capital campaigns, which is why this conversation is so exciting to me. And I just want to also let you know there is a survey at the end, a very short survey, and it'd mean a lot if you could, just before you jump off, take a moment to fill it out. And Gib, if you don't mind putting that in the chat, just in case anyone has to jump off early, then you can make sure you get it. All right, it is my great honor and pleasure to introduce our speakers. First, Sarah Newkirk, the Executive Director of the Land Trust. Sarah has been the Executive Director there since 2021. She is an energetic conservation strategist with a passion for bringing nature into communities by calling attention to the myriad values that land has for people. With her guidance, the Land Trust has matured into a regional conservation leader with 25 full-time staff, implementing the bold new strategic initiatives of its 5 to 50 conservation roadmap. Prior to joining the Land Trust, Sarah was a leader in advancing climate change resilience at the Nature Conservancy. And Sarah's achievements with the Land Trust of Santa Cruz County and with her and her team are protecting its flagship Rocks Ranch property, completing a new trail network at the San Vicente Redwoods, and successfully completing the Nature Connections campaign, which of course we will hear about today. Laura Dannehl-Schickman is the Development and Communications Director at the Land Trust. Laura is a third-generation Santa Cruzian. Laura attended UC Santa Cruz, where she majored in American Studies. She did fundraising in the Bay Area and attended graduate school at Cambridge University. And Laura is excited to work with an organization dedicated to preserving and sharing the core of what she believes makes Santa Cruz precious, its open spaces and wildlands. And I just want to say you two are just incredible leaders, and appreciate your time today. So if you can just start off by sharing with everyone an overview of the Land Trust of Santa Cruz County's work and the campaign objectives and outcomes.
Sure, I'll start, and generally our cadence will be I'll say something high level, and Laura will get into to the details. But so I'm really thrilled to be here, Sharon. Thank you for inviting us to be a part of this. It's really great to see so many amazing fundraisers joining us, and we're excited to share with you about the campaign. It was a successful campaign, and we're very proud of it. I don't want anyone to go into this forum thinking that we have a recipe for raising $60 million. I just want to adjust expectations that what we can share is our experience of entering this campaign kind of midstream, and especially as sort of new leaders in this organization. The Land Trust of Santa Cruz County has been around since 1978. And therefore has had any number of leaders before me. I joined in 2021, and the mission of the Land Trust is to conserve, care for, and connect all people to the vibrant natural and working lands that make Santa Cruz, in the words of our conservation director, the coolest place on earth. And it really is the coolest place on earth. And we're one of the reasons that we've been successful in fundraising is because we're incredibly passionate about our mission and incredibly motivated about this place that we live in, and our sort of moral obligation to share this place with the wild creatures and with all of the people that call this place home and that have the good sense to visit it. And so the mission has been around. We adjusted the mission recently as we embarked on a new strategic plan, which, as you'll learn, we did simultaneously with our capital campaign, not advised. But the new strategic plan we call our 5 years to 50 strategic plan, is we'll be 50 years old in 2028, and that strategic plan brought some new sort of energy into our mission and a couple of new strategic initiatives, really calling out that, you know, we wanted to really expand the group of people that were members of the land trust and were aware of our lands and connected to those lands and aware of our work. And this campaign was actually a really great way to bring people to the land. And we call it our Nature Connection Campaign. And part of that, part of the mission of the campaign was to connect the people of Santa Cruz County to the lands that we've protected. Laura, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, sure. So first I want to give a huge shout out to Stephen Slade, our previous executive director, and Kayla Pasley, who was our previous development director, who got the campaign started. And they're such fundraising powerhouses. When Sarah and I joined midstream, there were challenges to be certain, but so much of the big lift in the campaign had been accomplished. And so if you know them, then you know how awesome they are. And I just want to start by honoring the work that they did. But I joined the Land Trust January 2020. So for those of you that are fundraisers, you know that was a challenging time to be entering. And I joined as the major gifts officer. The Nature Connection campaign was really centered around two long-term projects and two new projects that dealt with connecting wildlife, of course, to open spaces and creating a connected landscape, and then connecting people to the land. So it was this great kind of culmination of some very long-term 12-year projects, as well as some new ones being brought to the community.
Great. Thank you so much for that background. So you were both new to your positions and you started them in the middle of a capital campaign, and neither of you, my understanding is, had ever done a capital campaign before. So can you share, what was that like?
I'll start, and by just sort of adding to the level of my naivete going into this campaign. I was not even a fundraiser. I had some fundraising experience, but I'm a program person, and my background is in climate change resilience and coastal systems. And so fundraising wasn't really part of my core competency, you might say. But as Laura indicated earlier, I think that we're fortunate to be set up for success from the very beginning of our time leading the campaign by the expertise and expert work done by Stephen Slade and Kayla Pasley, both of whom did have that experience. One of the things that I would say, just sort of about coming in midstream, maybe without the toolkit that you might want, is that we really needed to sort of seek some support elsewhere, right? And so Sharon was actually part of the picture of people that I called in to teach me how to do what was fundamentally my biggest job coming into the job of being executive director of the Land Trust. And I would also say, so really building the bench of support, identifying the people on our board of trustees that sort of had the institutional knowledge carried on, be able to sort of form that bridge between Stephen and myself. But yeah, I will say at the start that we couldn't have succeeded if it hadn't been set up really by others for us to succeed. The other thing that I would say that's really critical to any capital campaign is to have it be sort of underpinned by really inspiring projects. There's no question that in some ways the land trust's work raises money for itself, right? I mean, you only have to go out there on some of these landscapes and experience them firsthand to be incredibly inspired. And all we have to do is really create that connection between that inspiration that the donors feel when they are out on the land with us and how they can facilitate it by contributing their resources and really building that meaningful connection between what the donor's passion is and what they're seeing out there on the land. Laura?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely intimidating. I came back from maternity leave and my development director had found a new opportunity, and my other coworker, who was our engagement manager, was heading out on her maternity leave. So it had been Sarah, and then it was Sarah and me. But I had the benefit of being there from the start of the campaign. And so you might say I drank the Kool-Aid. Like, I was in love with the story we were telling around these massive projects. It was a lot, but it was also really exciting. And we were just starting to come out of COVID too, which was this great time period. So people, our community, going public with the campaign, our community, they were all really excited to come out and gather again in safe ways. And because of, the fact that we work with open space, we were really lucky to be able to invite people safely to those spaces, or in a way people felt comfortable. And so it was both intimidating, but also incredibly exciting, and energizing.
Yeah, great. And I heard you talking about, really inspiring projects. And I think that's really important, that when people have these big, huge campaigns, it has to have something really huge that is so exciting for people to make transformational gifts to, because the impact is so big. And I think I want to underscore what you said about that it was easy to connect people to the projects. And sometimes in capital campaigns, that's a lot harder. If you're talking about something that people they can't experience themselves, but you could take them out there and they could really just see the impact. And also hearing about your personal connection, Laura, you talked about that you both cared so deeply, and so you're making your excitement and energy contagious. And of course the unique timing of after the pandemic of getting together, but in a safe outdoor way. Yeah, those are great. Thank you. How did you approach donor stewardship, and especially being new that you were now talking to donors that you didn't necessarily have long-term deep relationships with? But you had to quickly build those relationships and make these asks within the time frame of your campaign. Can you speak to that?
That's a super important question, Sharon. And I think that one of the things that was the hardest about this campaign is that it was built on expectations of relationships that didn't belong to me. These were relationships that were built by somebody else, donors that were stewarded by somebody else. The information that I even had about any of them was mixed in terms of richness, and right. So I think that even the database could have been it could have been richer and provided me with a little bit more background. But even if I'd had that, I'm not sure that that's a substitute for actually having the connection with people. And so, I spent really my entire sort of first year on the job out the door, like meeting people and having lunches and having cocktails and taking tours and leading tours and right? It's just a lot of work, right? Fortunately, it's work that's that I find really exciting. I really like to connect with people. Again, I think that our donors are a group of incredibly special people that share, obviously we share a passion, and really it's not that hard to connect with people from whom you share that kind of a passion. The other thing I would encourage people to do, if they should be so unlucky as to find themselves in a situation where they have to raise a lot of money from people who don't even know them, is right, you have connectors in your organization, and identifying who those people are that have those connections. I think that one of the people that I would just call out specifically as being really critically important was Donna Murphy, who was formerly on our board. She lives part-time in Santa Cruz and part-time in Oklahoma. But she is just a pillar in the community, and she had a lot of those relationships with a lot of our donors, and was very open and helpful with just having people over to her house. And she would have a cocktail party, where she would invite a number of these people and have lunches together and make calls together and introductions. And so I think that one of the things that was actually difficult was, connecting with some people that may or may not have known that they were part of the sort of list of qualified donors that we would be looking to for a major gift, right? And so I think we can get into that a little bit more later, but I think that in the absence of those connections, it's really hard to make meaningful connections with people who don't know you. Laura?
I am going to add on to that and say, but it's also very liberating because they don't know you. So it's an opportunity to meet people, to get them excited about things, because you're a little bit of an unknown, and it's almost like a restart on the relationship. I think one of the things, let's see, I was trying to remember a certain story, but it's maybe it'll come back to me. But I spent a lot of time, like Sarah, just like out the door meeting with people. And I think one of the things that was really humbling and in a wonderful way was, even though I was a different face, people were connected to the projects and the work. I mean, some of these projects were 12 years long. And so it almost, in a way, it didn't matter if it was me or Kayla or Sarah or whoever. They wanted to have that connection to the work that they were helping support. So, saying, hey, I see that you made a gift to our wildlife crossing. Do you want to go see it? And people were like, yes. And so then you'd have tours and get to like restart that excitement for them, and kind of reforge that connection anew.
I want to underscore things that both of you said, which I think are so true in campaigns. One is that people give because they're inspired, right? It's that values alignment that's so important. And that's why, you look at, if there's an organization and they have, let's say, a major gifts officer, and when there's transition of staff, that donors can stay connected because they feel connected to the mission. But it's always great if they also are shared relationships, so that the only person that they know, doesn't leave and they don't know anyone else. And I think, because at the end of the day, also, there's lots of great organizations who are doing great work. And so how does somebody choose, I'm going to give to this organization versus that one? Oftentimes it's relationships and it's trust, and the people are giving to people. And so just also want to acknowledge, Sarah, we spoke about how much time in your first year you spent. And I think that it's so important that people have that. These campaigns take a lot of time. Fundraising takes a lot of time, and it's just critical to the success of building those relationships. I noticed that there are some questions in the chat I just want to acknowledge. One, there's a question about what stage was the campaign in. The question was, were you past the feasibility study? And you were well into the quiet phase, right? I just want you to confirm that.
We were, I think, nearly at the end of the quiet phase, right? And so the feasibility and planning stage was well over, right? So we were not part of that, and I think that's really important, because in terms of lessons learned, for, planning future campaigns. I don't know, right? I didn't get any lessons necessarily from this because we weren't really part of the planning. Laura was to a limited extent when she came on, but I was not. But we had certainly done, Stephen and Kayla did the hard work of sort of raising those leadership gifts. And thank goodness, because those are the most sort of relationship dependent, right? Those are the ones that are really sort of built on a fairly extensive history of engaging with a donor. And, so getting those secured, and that's what I mean when I say that we were pretty well set up for success. But when I joined, we were really getting ready to launch the public phase, which is awesome because for me, that's the best part. What I really wanted to do when I came to the Land Trust is to expand the pool of people that we were appealing to, not just for money, but obviously bringing to our landscapes and sharing with them how important this work is to us all here in Santa Cruz County. And so really sort of meeting with the mid-level and lower level donors in the pyramid, and really appealing to people that might not be aware of the Land Trust or might not be aware of this campaign, and encouraging them to join us and really expanding that pool. Laura?
I think you said it really well, Sarah. I mean, I would add that one of the challenges that we did face in that last stretch of coming in leadership roles in that time was that we still had a pretty significant chunk to go, even though all our major gift players had been asked. So we did have kind of a charge to find some new leadership gifts during the public phase as we're trying to also close. So that was a little bit of a pivot, but yeah.
Yes.
One of the things, Sharon, that I want to kind of just add some nuance about this campaign also is that, like, there are two numbers in your marketing materials for this forum. There are two numbers, right? The $60 million number is the total amount that was raised, but the 21 million is the amount of private funding that was raised. And we were very, very fortunate that we came into this campaign needing to raise, a big chunk of public money in addition to the private money. And you're just like, well, what is she crazy? That's not that fortunate. But it actually was, right? If you'll remember, we had, it had been sort of right on the heels of California finding itself in this wonderful budget surplus situation, right? The state had found itself in a budget surplus situation. It had launched this initiative called 30 by 30, in which it's committed to conserving 30% of the lands and waters of the state of California by the year 2030. And the governor and the legislature were really putting their money where their mouth was. And so it was this unprecedented moment of really being able to leverage this public energy around land conservation and nature and so forth, packaged together with this private fundraising piece. And it really was those two pieces coming together. And the end result was that we actually over-raised on the public side of our campaign, right? We actually raised more money than we set out to, because the projects are so inspiring and the sort of budget situation at the state was so unique.
Great. Thank you. And someone asked to define quiet phase. Thank you, Kent, for that question. And so I just want to say that sort of traditional phases of a campaign is that, one, there's a planning study or feasibility study. Hopefully there's a chance for you to speak to donors, and you can do it yourself. You can hire a third-party consultant, but there's some sort of process that you're testing. How much money can we raise? What's our best messaging? Who are the volunteer leadership we need? And so there's this pre-campaign work. And then you go into the quiet phase, which is, and it's called the quiet phase, it's not silent, but it's the time where you get to focus your energy on talking to the donors who have the ability to make the biggest donations to move your campaign forward. And then traditionally, you top it off with the public phase, where you invite the whole community to come in with donations of every level, so that the whole community can share in the success of the campaign, feel a sense of ownership. It's also a great way to be building for your future annual campaign, and then it's also a great for PR and marketing and getting your organization on the on the map. So that's the quiet phase versus the public phase. There was, if you can, Andy asked a question. I just want to, if you can really briefly, and I think you may have just kind of answered it. If you could talk quickly about the projects and how long the campaign was, how many years it was. Just what did you fund with this $60 million, and over what period of time did you raise it?
Laura, I'm going to leave the details to you.
Okay, so it was a 3-year campaign. We launched in the summer of 2020, which was definitely kind of an interesting time to launch. There was a lot of hemming. We had started the planning process and feasibility study section well before, and certainly when it had already been in the works when I came on board in January. With COVID, there was definitely a pause of like, is this the right time? Like, do we move forward with this? But, you know, after kind of surveying our membership, it really came out that like this was something that was really wanted and needed. People really wanted a feeling of hope. Getting outdoors was a lifeline for so many. And so we decided to move forward. And the projects that were encompassed in this were the San Vicente Redwood Trails, Phase 1, the trails at the Glenwood Open Space Preserve, both on the west and the east side. It was completing the Highway 17 wildlife crossing, as well as protecting land adjacent to Highway 101 that would be used for the next wildlife crossing. And that we call that Rocks Ranch. It's probably the biggest piece of property the Land Trust has undertaken stewardship and ownership of. It's 2,600 acres of oak woodlands, savanna. Sorry, I would wax poetic about this property. It's clearly my favorite, so apologies there. And there were also a number of other projects. So it encompassed some of our farmland protection work, so ag easements and ag land preservation, as well as some of our habitat restoration projects for like the endangered red-legged frog and protected pond turtle and things like that.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to ask a couple questions, and then we're going to go back to the questions in the chat. What were some of the lessons you learned from this successful campaign that you believe could benefit other nonprofit organizations embarking on their own huge campaigns?
I would start by encouraging people to just do a campaign. Don't do a campaign, and a strategic plan and a remarketing, rebranding strategy. I came on and I was just so glad to be here, right? So bright-eyed and bushy-tailed that I was like, I've got to do these 6 things. I've got to do them right now. And I think that happens with new executive directors. This is not an ED forum, but I think that you might hear this from others, that coming on and feeling like you have this honeymoon period in which, you know, your board's really excited about you being there, the org is really excited about you being there, and that you can do almost anything if you can make a reasonable case for it. And I was just like, this is it. This is my honeymoon period. I would encourage people to not do that. Like a capital campaign by itself is already enough, enough to focus on and enough to do. Laura, what would you add?
I would add investing in your fundraising and comm staff. I think one of the best things you can do to prevent burnout is make sure the workload is sustainable, but you still want your campaign to be successful. So doing a hard look well in advance of launching at who you need on the team to make it doable is really important. Yeah, because that will ensure that you don't have turnover, that you don't lose institutional knowledge, and that your team is gelled and ready for the next campaign.
Great advice. Thank you. I'm going to go to some of the questions in the chat. It's by Kirsten Lisk. Do you think a campaign like this could work if there is not infrastructure projects involved? What if there was only programming? Do you have a sense of, and I realize that's not what this campaign was about for you, but I don't know what your thoughts were.
We actually have a lot of thoughts about that right now. It's such a good question. That is something that we've been sort of tossing around. So after this campaign, Laura and I sat down and said, how can we not ever have to do that again, right? Is there any way that we can do something other than that? And so the question is like, are we going to be able to sort of sustain our operational funding needs, just doing an annual campaign, just doing annual fundraising? Is that possible? And I think that what we found out from the last year of trying to do that is that it's almost possible, but that what people really want to see is projects. And so, for example, this fiscal year, we focused on our annual fundraising, but then we got excited about a couple of things, and so we tacked them on to the end. And people gave to those projects like crazy, and they gave, you know, consistently to our sort of annual operating needs. But that appeals to a much more sort of intimate set of donors than, you know, land transactions, which you can bring all kinds of people out to a piece of land and get them really excited about it. And you can build in your sort of operational support to those asks. But I think that just a straight up operational ask, just sort of money to keep people employed and keep the lights on, that's going to appeal to a much more limited set of donors. Laura?
And to add on to it, I think part of that question too is asking, like, if you don't have like a piece of land to bring people out to, is this still doable or successful? And I think it can be. I worked for the Organic Farming Research Foundation in a previous life, which is another great org. Big shout out to them. And you know, we ran into the problem of connecting people to research, which is not as exciting sometimes as 2,600 acres of rolling golden hills with mountain lions. But it was still, there's ways to bring it alive in a very similar way. So the organization would host forums and bring the researchers out and talk about what they were doing and show, you know, you could take people out on tours of farms that were facing the issues that the research was tackling. So I think that there's definitely ways, even with something as esoteric as research, to connect people to in really powerful, meaningful ways. And as Sharon brought, you know, all three of us have said in some capacity, people give to people and people give to things that resonate to them and that they're passionate about. So when you can wed passion with people or something that they can connect with, someone, then it's definitely doable.
So much great wisdom. I love this. All right, I'm going to get back. We have a bunch of questions in the chat. I'm going to ask a couple of them. This is, the land trust seemed to have a 3-year campaign going in the past, even before this one, versus having an annual campaign. Is that accurate? And how will the land trust be going forward? Will you shift to another 3-year campaign or move to annual campaigns? By Kirsten Lisk.
So we talked about that just a little bit just now, and I think that we're going to likely do a mix of things. I think that the 3-year campaign model, based on this past year, where we just experimented with focusing exclusively on annual fundraising, but again, you get distracted by these projects and you bring them on, and it just demonstrates abundantly how much project-based fundraising can power philanthropy. And if you can package a group of projects together into a capital campaign and have that really drive your annual fundraising as well, it's an incredibly powerful model. And I think that we, disregard it at our peril. And so I think that, again, I'm big into data, and let's let the data tell us what we're capable of and what we can actually do. And I think that what the data have told us this past year is that the campaign model is a good one, a good solid one. And so we'll probably go back to that soon. Laura?
Yeah, and to build on that, I think we're seeing trends, and I'm sure you guys have all seen it too, across philanthropy, where the recommendation is to build in your general operating into your asks that are program based. And if, kind of having a list of all your programs or work that you're doing with the calculus on, for each one of what % is going to general operating, and including that in the budget build out. And I think, we've been talking with our donors and trialing it in this kind of way. And everyone is just like, oh yeah, of course you need staff to make this project possible. And they don't bat an eye. And it's really a wonderful thing because, again, you're showing them the work and whatever type of work it is. And immediately, because they love that and they want to support it, they are like, yes, of course, and staff need funding too. So it's really wonderful.
And it helps also, you know, one of the tactics that we use regularly is making sure that it's not just me and Laura that the donors are interacting with. They're interacting all the time with our acquisitions director, our conservation director, our stewardship director. So we make sure that those faces and those connections are made, both because those people know vastly more about the projects than we know, but also so that people, you know, our donors are able to see that, you know, it's not just a piece of land that I'm purchasing here. It's land plus these people have to take care of it. And I think it's one of the sort of aspects of the land trust's work that goes a little bit, you know, it gets kept a little bit too much in the background, in my view, is that like everybody thinks that we're just out there buying and protecting land. You put a sign in the ground and you can call it done. Your job here is done, but it's not. It's actually a perpetual obligation, and taking care of land. I mean, you only have to think about sort of what it costs you in terms of time and labor to take care of your backyard. It's not nothing. And if we're talking about a 2,600 acre property, just for reference, in case you don't know, an acre is the size of a football field. And so Rocks Ranch is like 2,600 football. That's a lot of land, and just making sure that we don't have invasive species, we don't have you know, inconsistent uses and trespass and all this kind of stuff. It becomes very expensive, and we need the donors to be able to see what all those costs are and have a full comprehensive picture.
Right. So it's not just the relationship building, but it's really educating people in a way that they really understand. I'm going to ask that you spoke a little bit about this in the sharing relationships. And it's a question from Kent. If you can speak about how you brought on your board and also maybe some volunteers, how did you engage others beyond your staff in supporting this campaign?
Yeah, I think board, you know, bringing along the board is so key. And we talk a lot about sort of the culture of philanthropy and how we sort of within the land trust help people recognize what their specific role in donor relations and fundraising actually is. Because I think that we have a lot of people on our board that are content experts, right? And we have people who were formerly EDs of conservation groups or who participated in the county planning department. So people with different types of expertise that is not necessarily obviously connected with philanthropy and with fundraising, and making sure that they are able to see clearly what their role in the project of completing the campaign is, and whether it is connecting us with people who we can get to know and cultivate and then steward and then ultimately ask, having a party, participating in a tour, calling a donor to say thank you. There are lots of things that the board can be involved in, and the rest of the staff too, right? When I say we have a culture of philanthropy, they all know that they're expected to be involved with this as well. And so when we have events, the staff are out there staffing the events and interacting with donors. And before every event, we say, just to remind you, don't talk to each other. You're out there to talk to these donors. They're wonderful people. Get to know them, let them get to know you. And so I think that, you know, making sure that everybody sort of knows what their role is, and that, first of all, that everybody has a role and what their specific role is, and giving them enough time to ask us questions like, I don't really get what I'm supposed to do, because for sure we know we were able to sort of fill in that gap. Laura?
I think you said it really well. Our board was our development committee on the board was our de facto campaign committee. And they were wonderful. It was nice, I know, because there were times where we were so in the weeds and hustling in the campaign to be able to go to them. And they were kind of in the sweet spot of, they know the organization, they're very involved, but they weren't in the weeds with us. So we could kind of come to them and be like, we think we've exhausted this line. What do you think? And they would have a fresh perspective to give. And so it was really powerful to have them.
Thank you. This is a question, and I don't know if you have this data point, if you weren't here from beginning to end, but do you know what the split of your donors that were repeat donors versus donating for the first time with this campaign? That's from Ariel Gray.
This is a detailed question, Laura, and so I'm leaving it to you.
I will do my best to answer, Ariel. So we had a lot of repeat donors. I think people gave because the campaign was structured in a way that annual gifts were counted into the campaign. And so gosh, we have on average around like 1,200 members or donors each year. I would say that during the last stretch of the campaign, we got a bump because people who had given and like 12 years previous when we did our first Highway 17 capital campaign, um, we're excited to see the culmination of that project and gave again. And so we were able to track some of those, but then we also were able to bring in, I think, around 400 new supporters. My membership manager would probably have things to say about this. But that was really, again, through the public phase, because Highway 17 is such a highly visible project area. I mean, our visitors coming from over the hill drive it to get here. It's one of the only paths in. But also we were able to get media coverage of the project throughout the Bay Area and things like that, which definitely helped.
I want to just add something. What Laura just said made me think that one of the shortcomings that we experienced during this campaign was that we had previous campaigns that alluded to or maybe even explicitly incorporated some of these projects. Land projects take a long time. And so one of the things that we bumped into from time to time was a donor that said, I think I already gave to this project. Where the heck is the wildlife crossing and what is taking so long? And it's actually very sort of in the weeds to have to explain, well, we had to protect land on both sides. And then we had to talk to Caltrans and they didn't want to talk to us. So we had to talk to CDF. So there was a number of steps, and having, you don't want to be having that kind of a conversation with a donor. And so making sure that you're anticipating that in advance is where did my last donation to this project go, and having sort of a nice clear answer to that. The other project that was a centerpiece of this campaign was, Laura alluded to, we were building trails in the San Vicente Redwoods, which is up in Bonnie Doon. And the other thing that happened in 2020 that maybe goes unmentioned is that forest burned down, right? So we had planned all these trails. We'd raised some public money to go along with our private fundraising in the campaign. And then the CZU fire that's a 9,000 acre property. And I think that half of it burned. It's crazy. And you can go up there now and look at, we've completed the trails thanks to this campaign. And you can actually see the forest recovering. And that, but having to sort of talk to donors about like what's taking so long with these trails, that at least is a simpler answer. Well, there was this big fire and we all knew it, and that it sort of threw our plans in disarray. But I think recognizing that sometimes these projects actually take a long time, and to not have these gifts be so transactional that folks are going to really expect results, and results fast.
So you have mentioned this in passing, but there's another question. If you can be really specific about that this is a comprehensive campaign, and as opposed to just a sort of traditional capital campaign, and your sort of strategy of, if you can explain what that is, the capital versus the comprehensive, and why you chose that route.
Yep, that's correct. And I'll leave it to Laura to share the details.
I'll do my best. I always joke I'm a stories gal, not a numbers gal. But the reason why we've gone with that method, so first of all, comprehensive being that both the capital projects and our general operating or unrestricted fund needs are packaged into one. And so A certain percentage of any person's gift goes to the projects and the scope of the campaign, as well as funding, keeping the lights on. And we've gone with that campaign method because of the nature of kind of the work that we do. We have these large scale capital projects that often span multiple years. So capital campaigns generally don't go 3 years or everyone burns out and says, uncle. But our projects have to, or our campaigns need to last that long, because that's for us, that's a really short window of time for a lot of these things. And so because we're able to then build excitement around walking proposed trails or visiting habitat that needs protection and things like that, it made sense for us to then build, not do 2 asks and build in the general operating into those asks.
I think what I'm hearing from other fundraisers and other organizations is that that is more and more the norm, right? I think that Laura said early in this conversation that even in our annual fundraising, it likely makes sense to create donor offers that have components of our capital work and components of our unrestricted funding need, our operational support, staff, whatever, packaged together into a single proposal effectively, so that it can really link the capital project with the people and the other sort of needs to make it run. Sharon, you're on mute.
Thank you. It's a question from Cindy. What is your formula for making the ask? Did trustees accompany the staff? Did staff handle the ask alone? Did the trustees go on their own? If you sent trustees out, how are they coached? Could you speak to how the solicitations were made?
Sure, it really is dependent on the donor and the holder of the relationship. I brought trustees along with me if there was a trustee available to do it, and that trustee had the relationship that would sort of facilitate the ask. I did plenty of asks on my own, again, depending on who we were talking to and what the relationship was. I'm not aware that we asked any trustees to make any asks on their own. I would be pretty reluctant to do that. Laura?
Yeah, I did a lot of asks on my own, or with one of our program staff as a content expert. And actually now this year we're bringing I'm bringing trustees out on walks more as relationship building. It's a nice time to do that because a lot of it's stewardship as opposed to kind of campaign mode. And so I'm trying to forge those connections now between our donors and board members, but always with a staff person present. I think it's really nice to have both sides represented in the relationship building.
One of the things that's great, again, about talking about a culture of philanthropy in your organization is that you can have this sort of explicit conversation with your trustees about, like, well, if the various roles, Sharon, you like to say that you have askers, you have ambassadors, and then you have something else that begins with an A, advocates, or
Advocates.
So, and understanding for each trustee what their preferred role is, right there. I have trustees that shudder with horror about asking, and some of those trustees actually have incredibly solid relationships with really, really important people, and so you need them in your campaign team, you need them in your development committee, but they're never gonna. I have one trustee who says, like, if you actually relied on me to tell you when the right time to make the ask was, it would never actually happen. I have other trustees that say, if you guys just set it up, I don't want to be involved in setting anything up. I don't want to do relationship. I want to just make the ask. And right, so we have those people too. And I think I can run down my list of trustees and tell you exactly what kind of person each one of those is. And I think that says something about sort of the investment and relationship building with our trustees, just as a preparatory step to getting involved and sort of bringing them into your campaign. I know what tools they're each comfortable using.
Yeah, that's so well said and so important. Thank you. A question from Cindy is, were any of the funds raised to endow a project? Was an endowment part of this campaign?
It was not, to my knowledge. Again, I was not part of the planning, and so the numbers are a little bit mysterious. I think what we did was to say specifically that any legacy gifts that we get come in and they become part of our organizational endowment. They're not endowing specific properties. The one exception that I would make is that our Glenwood, our work on the Glenwood Preserve does have an endowment, but it's a public endowment. It wasn't part of the private philanthropic part of this campaign. Laura, any nuance to that, or did I get it?
You got it.
So looking back, is there anything you would have done differently in executing or planning or executing this campaign?
Yes, but we didn't plan this we didn't plan this campaign. First of all, again, great honor to Stephen and Kayla, who did plan this campaign. The fact that it was such a profound success is like the proof is in the pudding, right? We did it, we succeeded. One of the sort of positive affirmative lessons that I would take from it is that having that powerful story is one of my trustees like to say, you can raise anything if the story that you're telling is mountain lions on a beach, right? That's an easy story, right? It's nice to really be able to get that profound thing that people can really rally around and people really can support. One of the things that I would have liked to have more of going into the campaign was data. Right, I'm not aware that a formal feasibility study was a part of this campaign. And anytime we do another one, I would like that to be a part of the campaign. I think that we owe it to ourselves to know as much about our likelihood of success and really where to focus our efforts and what resonates with our donor pool. And again, I think Stephen and Kayla had such deep knowledge of the donor pool going into this campaign that they didn't have to, maybe they just didn't have to worry about it because they knew what they were working with. I would probably do a feasibility study even if I'd been 10 years in this job, just because I want to validate that information. Times change, circumstances change, the economy changes. And with it can come changes in people's sort of enthusiasm and willingness to support a campaign. Laura?
I'm going to build off what you say. I'm super relational in my fundraising, and I sympathize with not always wanting to capture the data in the database. But it's so critical. And because if there is a staffing change or things like that, or even if it's just, building your own institutional memory, or like, I need to reference my notes. Like I may have a feeling like, oh, I think I remember that person resonating with wildlife and but it's like, if I actually had typed out the notes from the last donor meeting and had it in the database to see, I could even go back and refresh my own memory, or Sarah could see it on the fly on the way to a meeting. Having that data captured is just so critical. And so, it's definitely something we are working on post-campaign, is making sure that everything gets captured so that we don't have to reinvent the wheel every time.
Thank you. So the burnout rate amongst executive directors and development professionals is so incredibly high. And I'm so happy that you are still here in your roles doing such great work. Can you please share what sustains you, and how have you managed to find moments of balance during your campaign and in your roles in general?
There's a formal objection in court. That's the wording is, you're assuming facts, not an evidence, right? The idea that Laura and I have a super good work-life balance is not correct. And it definitely wasn't correct during the campaign. you know, what we do at the Land Trust is really underpinned by triage all the time, right? There's vastly more conservation work than can be done, and identifying, again, what's the most important and what's the most urgent, and really sort of prioritizing those things. But also sort of setting guardrails and expectations around yourself and your availability. Everybody who knows me knows that email is the worst possible way to reach me, right? If you actually want to reach me, you should call me, because I consistently end up with hundreds of unread emails in my inbox, mostly because I set when I go home to my kids, I'm going to be with my kids. I'm not checking my phone. I'm not doing any of this stuff. And I think that making sure that you're setting boundaries for yourself, both for, you know, the organization and donor relationships outside of the organization, is super critical. Laura?
Agreeing that it's something that's constantly being dialed. I'm a mom of 4, one of which is just 7 months old. And so it's constantly adjusting and walking that line. I know as many of you feel the same way. You want to be accessible to your donors, to your supporters. But what I've found really works for me is I put my inbox on silent for when I'm out of office at the end of my day. It just automatically clicks on, so I don't feel guilty turning it on. And everything's muted until it starts up again at 8 a.m. the next day. So that's been really awesome. But also, you know, I know I said this earlier, but having a team to do the work with me is really critical, and to feeling like I can actually put my inbox on mute and that something dire isn't going to happen. I think one thing that I really appreciated about the Land Trust when I joined is that there was a mentality of supporting fundraising. Like, that was a valued department. You know, people, when I told coworkers that I was going there, they're like, wow, there's like, you know, 3 people who work in fundraising, or is it 4? Are you going to be the 4th person in the fundraising department? And I was like, yeah, I am. And this is amazing. And so I think it's easy sometimes to think because we are funding such critical work, whether, you know, you're in, you know, human services or land conservation, whatever it is, like, we're here because there's a need. But it's really important to remember that you can't fund that need without the fundraisers. And so, yeah, that's my soapbox. I'll get off of it now.
Thank you so much. Ged, can you please put the link again to the survey? I'm noticing we have just one more minute, and I'm hoping everyone can just take a moment, because your feedback is really valuable as we continue to do these development forums and want to make sure that we're continuing to craft them in a way that's making them interesting and spaces that you want to come. So Sarah and Laura, I just want to thank you wholeheartedly for sharing your wisdom, your lessons, and your heart and your vulnerability for showing up. And I know I learned a lot today. I know everyone did, and just great appreciation. So thank you so much for being here. And
well, thank you, Sharon, for giving us the opportunity. And thanks, everybody. It's really good to see you. Some faces I know and some I don't. And again, reach out to me and Laura. We're pretty open with the experience, and again, we love people, and that's why we do the work that we do.